Thank you, Saul. Right, before we start, I have a question. Put your hand up if you do not have a personality. Hands up. Okay? Right, put your hand up if you do not have a dark side. Anybody? Okay, so we've all got one, right? Everybody's got a Tom, Professor Ormerod. Really, we've all got a dark side. Okay, I'm not suggesting anyone's got any bodies under the patio, although, but we've all got bits of our personality that aren't perfect. Okay, that, you know, given the time, the energy, maybe we do a little bit of something about, especially those of us who are psychologists, but we never quite get round to it. Okay. Right, is there anyone else here who's a parent? Just me, or quite a few of us here are parents. Right, those of you who are parents, back me up here. When you become a parent, before you have the child, you are going to be the perfect parent, right? You are going to be spot on. When the child comes along, do these bits of your personality that are not perfect, do they, or do they not, come along and stick their fingers in your parenting? They do, right? So all of you who do not have children, you know, trust me, these bits come along and they interfere with your parenting. Now, we call these parenting hotspots, okay? Bits of your personality that stop you being the perfect parent, because there is no such thing as the perfect parent. Now, the best parents are not hotspot free. They just know where their hotspots are, and they do their best to mitigate the impact of those hotspots on their parenting. So everyone here who is a parent, you will have hotspots. I know I have hotspots. I think I know where most of them are, and I sort of look out for them. If you have a lot of anxiety in your life, if you perhaps have an anxiety disorder, is that anxiety sometimes going to come along and be a hotspot? Well, yes, of course it is. And that's okay, because we all have hotspots. They all get in the way. Now, what this lecture is about helping parents who are anxious to identify where their hotspots might be and to think what they can do just to ameliorate the impact of them a little bit. And that's what I've been doing for, well, most of my career has kind of been working up towards it, but it's certainly what I've been focusing on for the past 7 or 8 years. Okay, right, over to the slides. So first of all, does it matter? Does it matter if you have an anxious parent? Well, the evidence would suggest it does. So some very much loved and trusted colleagues of mine from Reading University, where Shirley is from, did a meta-analysis. And what that means, for those of you who are not familiar with the field, is you get all the research that's ever been done on an area, and you stick it in a pot and you stir it up, and it comes out with one lovely big number that you can really trust. It really tells you what's going on. And so they did a meta-analysis of what happens if you are an anxious parent. What do your kids look like? How do your kids come out? And this is what they found. Children of anxious parents were twice as likely to be anxious themselves compared to kids who didn't have an anxious parent. They were also more likely to be depressed. Now, that's clearly worrying, and we need to do something about that. But before I go on, I would say at this point, in a way there's some good news in here. This means that the vast majority of children who are being raised by anxious parents will not be anxious. They'll be fine. It just means that their risk is increased. Right. Why is this? Why are you more likely to have an anxiety disorder if your parent has one? Well, it could be genes, it could be environment. And until fairly recently, the assumption has been it's a bit of both, really. But a study was published a couple of years ago, a children of twins study, which is where you get a load of twins, grown-up twins, and you look at their kids. And it's a really good way of seeing how things are transmitted within families. So this study looked at how anxiety might be transmitted in this big sample of twins and their kids, and this is what they concluded. There was no evidence of genetic transmission, significant genetic transmission. It's from a very good group of researchers who, Talia Ely, very much trusted colleague of mine, runs a tight ship, has great integrity. I was a bit shocked by this finding. I'm sure you were, Shirley. I think a lot of us were. But it's good research, and so I think we have to think very seriously that the genetics are not a big part of this. Okay, that suggests that it's mostly environment. Okay, and when we talk about environment, one of the big factors in the environment of a child is the parent that's raising them. It's not the only important thing. There are lots of things in a child's environment that can determine whether they become anxious or whether they become confident. But parents are clearly very important, so that is what I'm talking about today. But please don't take it to mean that parents are the only thing. Right. So, why does being an anxious parent mean that your kids are going to have more anxiety in their life? What is it that anxious parents are doing or not doing or doing differently that means their kids are more at risk of being anxious? Well, here we go. Anxiety makes us all act a bit funny. There is tons of research, approximately I would say 2 million papers written on what being anxious does to your brain and to your behaviour. It just makes you be a bit funny. So for instance, if you are anxious about something, we know that it tends to cause attentional biases. And that means that you will spot scary things much more quickly than a non-anxious person. So if someone is scared of spiders, they will have noticed that cobweb up in the corner there. No one else has noticed it, but the person who's scared of spiders has noticed it. That is an attentional bias. If you're scared of something, if you're worried about something, you will spot every little clue that it is around you in your environment. It's like you have special goggles on that spot the things that you're scared of. Memory. Jury's out a little bit on this one. It's not quite so clear-cut, but there is some evidence that if you are an anxious person, it affects the way you remember things. So if something scary happens to two people, if one of them is anxious, they will remember it differently to the one who is not anxious. They'll probably remember it in a more scary sort of way. And then we've got information processing. We as humans are bombarded by information all the time, constant sensory information coming in through eyes or ears or noses, everything. We can't process it all. We have big brains, but we're not that good. So we have to ignore bits of it. That's the attentional bias bit. We notice the bits that are important to us. But also, a lot of that information coming in is a little bit vague. And our brain has to decide what to do with it. So you get an email from your boss saying, will you come to see me please? I want to discuss how you've been getting on the past 6 months. What do you think if you're confident? Well, if you're confident, you think, oh, I'm going for a pay rise here. If you're anxious, what are you thinking? I'm going to be sat, exactly. And this is where information processing biases come in. If you're anxious and a bit of vague information comes in, you're going to put a negative slant on it. Okay. Is anybody scared of the dentist? Okay. Yeah. Did you spot this picture quite quickly? Did it leap out the screen at you? Yes, absolutely. That's attentional bias, alive and well, and living in Brighton. Okay, right. So there's tons of evidence that if you are anxious, you do all these things differently with your brain. And the question that we had was, well, if you are a parent and you are anxious, does this then extend to things in your child's world? So if you're scared of spiders, you will have an attentional bias for spiders. But if you are anxious about your child, will you have an attentional bias for things that are dangerous to your child? And we thought, well, I reckon they probably do, but we don't know, so we need to check that out. So what we did is there's some research I did with my wonderful PhD student, Bridie Gallagher, a few years ago in Manchester. And we made parents anxious. Can I just say at this point that everything I have done goes through an ethical review board and has been approved. So some of the stuff may look a little bit dodgy, but it is all fine. So we made people anxious. The way we did this is these were random parents that we dragged in. And we stuck a video camera in the corner of the room and said, oh, don't worry about that. That's just, we just get you to give a 5-minute talk at the end, and then we just show it to some psychologists to see how anxious you are. But don't worry about it, it's fine. Obviously, people get really quite anxious about that. Their anxiety levels rise. Great, this is just exactly what we want. We want them anxious. And then we give them these ambiguous situations about their child. So your child's walking to school and feels funny in their tummy. What do you think's going on there? And we ask these parents, what do you think is happening? Those parents where we've made them anxious with our video camera produce more negative explanations. Oh, my child's going to be really ill, they're going to vomit everywhere, it'll be a disaster, I'll be late for work, it'll all be a nightmare. Anxious parents also expected their child to be more distressed than the calm parents that we also had in this study. They thought their child was going to freak out about it more. So this was the first really inkling that we had that yes, if a parent is feeling anxious, it does things to their information processing. It does make you respond to your child's world slightly differently. Okay, we then thought, will being anxious give parents attentional biases about things in their child's world? So what we did here was we made parents anxious again. We did the video camera trick to make them feel socially anxious. But we also wanted to make them feel anxious about their child. Let me start again. Some people we made socially anxious by pointing a video camera at them. Some people, though, we wanted them not to feel anxious about something that was going to happen to them. We wanted them to feel anxious about their child. So what we did to them is this. Alison and Mark, do you recognise this photograph? This is my good friend Lauren, who is in this photo, appearing to have fallen down the stairs quite catastrophically. She is alive and well and doing her A-levels, can I just reassure you now. But she modelled these photos for us because what we wanted to do is show these photos to parents and say, I want you to imagine that this is your child. We've got a picture of a kid who looks like they've been knocked off their bike and various things. I want you to imagine this is your child and tell me what you would be thinking and what you would be feeling. This was to raise some anxiety about your child in these parents. Then we had a group of parents where we just showed them pictures of buildings and said, tell us what you think about this building. So it was really boring, neutral. It wasn't making them anxious. It was just filling a bit of time. Okay. Right. So then what we did is we did what's called a dot probe experiment. And the best way to explain this is to do it on you. So are you ready? I want you to look at that X. Okay, just keep your eyes on that X. In a moment, the X is going to disappear and a big blue dot is going to appear. Now when you see that dot, I want you to shout dot. Are you ready? Here we go. Dot. Okay, now I heard two lots of dot there. I heard a lot of people say dot quickly and then a few people say dot a little bit, like half a second later on. Okay, did anyone notice anything else as well as the dot? Some words. Did anybody read the words? Elephant and? Well done, somebody spotted it. Okay. Okay, so the dot appeared where the word paedophile was. Okay. Yeah, and what we do when we do this on a computer is you look at how quickly people respond to the dot. Now, if the dot appears where it said elephant and people respond quickly, that means they were looking at the word elephant. If they respond, if the dot was behind the worrying word and people respond quickly, that means their attention had been attracted to that worrying word. And what we found was this. So we gave them the dot probe with social threat words like interview, or child threat words like paedophile. I'm going to get questions later on, Ty, about this, sorry. Okay, and this is what we found. So here we have social threat words. Okay, I don't know if you can see this here. Social threat words and how quickly our three different conditions pick them up. And so people who had been looking at pictures of buildings didn't pick them up very quickly. People who had been looking at pictures of children didn't pick them up very quickly. People who had been thinking about the video camera picked the social threat words up really quickly. And this is exactly what we expected to find. This is what the literature always finds. The next one is the more interesting one for us. These are child threat words. And what we found is people who'd look at pictures of buildings, people who'd got the video camera pointed at them, didn't pick these words up very quickly at all. And they didn't have their attention dragged to them. People who had been looking at the child threat pictures, looking at pictures of Lauren in dire straits, they spotted the child threat words really quickly and really easily. Their attention was being dragged away from towards the threatening pictures. Okay, so we think that tells us something really interesting. That if you are worried about your child, worried about something bad happening to your child, then when bad stuff is around you, you will spot it. You will spot those bad things. You will spot that headline in the newspaper. You will, spot the, big hairy dog with the, slightly rabid-looking thing. You will spot these things because you think they might harm your child. Right. We then looked at emotion recognition. So there is some evidence that if you are anxious, when you look at people's faces, you may read their emotions just very slightly differently. So if you're an anxious adult and you look at another adult, you're more likely to see anger in that face. You're more likely to see sadness in that face, even when it's not really there. So we thought we'd try this with kids. So we gave parents an emotion recognition task. So they got lots of pictures like this. Loads of these pictures of American child actors with portraying facial emotions. And what you had to say was what emotion this child is showing. Sad, angry, it's got cut off, fearful, or happy. And you had to click which one it is. And what we found is that our socially anxious parents who'd had the video camera pointed at them made a few mistakes. They kept saying children's faces and voices. We had some voices from children as well. Kept saying they were sad when they weren't really sad, which tells us that when you are feeling anxious, you are possibly reading things into your child's voice and into your child's face, or a random American child's face and voice actually, that may not be entirely accurate. So it's interesting. Information processing. We did this with Andy over there. We got a load of parents, just random parents off the street, and we gave them questions like this. At parents' evening, the teacher discusses your child's behaviour. And we asked parents, what do you think is going on here? And lo and behold, parents who score highly on a measure of anxiety said things that were prone to thinking these sentences were really negative. Whereas the less anxious parents tended to think they were neutral or even quite positive. Okay. So we're getting lots of evidence that having a lot of anxiety in your life as a parent might impact the way you read cues about your child, at how you interpret information that's coming into you about your child's world, and we think that might have an impact. Just going to step back a little bit now and look at how we get to be scared and anxious, okay? How we learn to be afraid and anxious. There's a famous psychologist called Jack Rackman, Canadian psychologist, very famous, very, very well known, and he reckons that there were 3 ways to becoming scared of something. And he's probably right, isn't he, Andy? Most people pretty much accept that there's these 3 ways. So the first one is verbal information, okay? So you're walking along the street with your dad, and there's a massive, big, slavering Doberman over there. And your dad says, don't touch it, my rabies. Okay, that is verbal information, and we know from Andy's really elegant research that Andy's done that this is enough to give a kid a phobia. Okay, just verbal information. The kid's not been bitten by the dog's not come near them. They've just heard something nasty about that dog. The next one is vicarious learning. So you're walking along the road with your dad and you see the massive slavering Doberman, and your dad goes like that. Okay, doesn't even say anything, just pulls you away from the dog. Doesn't need to say a word. You've not been bitten by it. No one's told you anything about that dog. That is enough potentially to give you a fear of that dog. And the final one is direct conditioning. So if the dog actually bites you, fair enough, you're probably going to get a phobia of it. But actually, when you do surveys of people with fears and phobias, and you say, where did it come from? Very few of them have actually been bitten by that dog or that spider or that snake or whatever. It's usually these 2 pathways. They've heard other people telling them scary things about it, or they've seen other people being scared. It's very, very powerful means of passing on anxiety to other people. We also think this one is important because we think sometimes, and I've seen this occasionally with anxious parents, that they reward a child for being afraid. Okay, so they'll praise their child for staying away from the dog. Or if the child goes up to the dog to stroke the dog, they'll smack the child or shout at them out of, fear. So that's another way of directly conditioning a child to have a fear or a phobia. Right. Plus, some research that I did back in Manchester seems to suggest that when you are an anxious parent, it may interfere with some aspects of your general behaviour management, how you manage your children's behaviour, which is, as parents, it's probably what you spend 80% of your time doing with them, isn't it? Trying to get them to do what you want them to do. Not you, George, obviously you're perfect all the time. Right. So we gave some questionnaires. It's very quick and dirty research, really, but it's a start. We gave questionnaires to loads of mothers. We went to mothers and toddler groups and gave out questionnaires that measured anxiety and also got people to report on how they managed their child's behaviour. We did the same again with primary school age children and their mothers. Got the mums to fill in questionnaires about their own anxiety level and how they managed their child's behaviour. And what we found was this. Anxious parents were less likely to enforce boundaries. So they're more likely to do the tidy away your toys. Child doesn't tidy away the toys. The parent is more likely to say, oh, I haven't got the energy, pick your battles, not going to enforce it. Okay? We also found these parents, anxious parents, more likely to report shouting at their child and smacking their child. So in some ways they were more relaxed as parents, more lax, and in other ways they were a bit more harsh. So it would all get too much and they'd snap and they'd more likely to shout. Okay. We think we can change all of these things. We think we can help parents with all of the things that I have just talked about. So as a first bit of evidence for that, I did a treatment trial when I was in Manchester for parents of young anxious kids. Now these parents weren't recruited because they were anxious, although actually a lot of them were quite anxious themselves. They came along because their child was anxious. But these were very young children, and at that point there were no interventions for young anxious children. There was nothing out there. So I did a trial of an intervention where we basically just taught parents what to do when your kid gets anxious. And we talked to parents all about the behaviour management, and we talked to parents about not giving verbal information about fear, not giving vicarious information about fear, and so on. So parents came along 2 hours a week for 10 weeks in a little group. We had great fun with it. And this is what we found. So I can never I use this graph time and time again. Every time I can't understand it myself. Right, so this is the number of kids with anxiety disorders. These are our wait list kids. So kids who had an anxiety disorder when they came in and then had nothing, no treatment, and then 10 weeks later, this is how many of them still had an anxiety disorder. This happens all the bloody time in anxiety research. People get better, and then it looks like no treatment has worked. Actually, what's happening is they're not getting better, but anxiety goes up and down with kids. And so if you measure them in the school holidays, they were like, no, I'm fine. 6 weeks before, they were, terrible. So, but we did get a reduction in our waiting list. But in our intervention group, so these are our kids where their parents had our 10-week intervention. We didn't see the kids at all. 27 kids with full-blown anxiety disorder. 10 weeks later, only 4 of them still had the primary anxiety disorder that they came along with. And this was still the case 12 months later. In fact, things have got even better 12 months later. So this seems to suggest that you can do a lot with parents. You can have a real impact working with parents. Good, we thought. Let's see how we can move on from here. So I started getting interested in, well, if a parent has an anxiety disorder, we know their kids are more likely to have problems. Nobody's really doing anything about this. So what can we do? Well, and so we thought, well, we could put them through the intervention we just talked about. 10 weeks, 2 hours a week, come along, we'll tell you what to do, and then your kid won't be anxious. But actually, parents don't want that, particularly if their kid's looking all right at the moment. They're not going to come along for 20 hours, suddenly rambling on. They don't see the problem, they're busy, they're not going to come. So we thought we've got to make it short and sweet. The other thing is the NHS is not mad keen on prevention in mental health really at the moment, is it? So the NHS wasn't going to stomp up for that. So we thought we've got to do it really, really cheap and really, really quick. Otherwise, the NHS won't pay for it and the parents won't come. So there is a respectable history of 1-session treatments for anxiety disorders in adults and actually now in kids. So if you've got a phobia, you can go along to Lars Grön in Sweden, and so you turn up with your spider phobia at 9 in the morning, he turns you out 4 o'clock in the afternoon with no spider phobia, works in 80% of cases. It's really good. I've never attempted it with my worm phobia, but I'm told it works. So There is also some evidence that one-session parenting interventions can work. So Australian research, they basically get parents in to do a day of just basic good parenting stuff. These are just regular parents they dragged in off the street, and generally they're parents where there isn't really too much going wrong, to be honest. But what they find is that just one day is enough to impact on parenting behaviour and to impact on children's behaviour problems. So we thought, well, that'll do us. We'll do a one day. That's what we'll do. We'll squash it all into there. So this is what we do, and I'm now going to run through what we do in our one-day intervention for parents who have anxiety disorders. So who we're looking at here is we hang out at adult mental health clinics for people who come along because they are experiencing a lot of anxiety. And we say to them, have you got kids? And they say yes. And we say, do you want to come on a course? And they bite your hand off because parents, everyone wants things to be the best for their kids. Nobody wants their kids to be anxious, and parents who are anxious really don't want their kids to be anxious. They don't want them to go through what they've gone through. So we get them to come along for one day, and in the first little bit of it, the first quarter, the first sort of half of the morning, we talk about anxiety. And so, first of all, we talk about the fight-flight response. So I'm just going to tell you a little story now, show you how we do this with parents. So, here we go. Here we have a little caveman. Okay, little caveman, and he is skipping through the forest, minding his own business, when all of a sudden, round the corner, he sees a ginormous... Can you tell what it is yet? Now, if you want to be a clinical psychologist, you do have to be good at drawing. Fortunately, I am. So, our little caveman sees the dinosaur. What is he thinking? No, he's not thinking they died out 200,000 years ago. Thank you. He's thinking, he's going to eat me. Yes. So if he's thinking that, what is his emotion going to be? His feeling? Fear, anxiety, scared. And what is his behaviour going to be? He's going to want to run. Now, a little biology lesson. Well, you tell me. What does your body have to do to make you run really fast? Produce adrenaline. Oh, you lot are good. Right, okay, so adrenal glands pumping out adrenaline. What does that adrenaline do to help you run fast? It increases your heart rate, yeah, that's right. And why is your heart rate increasing? What's it pumping? Blood to muscles, yeah, exactly. Now, all this blood that's going to your muscles, where's it coming from? Are you making new blood? No. Does anyone know where you take it from? From your stomach, yeah, from lots of places, but mostly from your visceral organs, your guts. You're busy digesting breakfast. Frankly, breakfast can wait, so it gets pulled away and sent to your muscles. Right, okay, now what else is this blood carrying to your muscles? What's oxygen? Where's that coming from? Lungs. Your lungs are working really hard to pull in air. Those are lungs. Okay, right, now, all of this stuff that's happening to the caveman, what's that going to do to his body temperature? Up, down, raise. It's going to get quite hot. Yeah, and a bit sweaty. Okay, right, fast forward 10,000 years. What? Okay. And now I'm going to draw a modern 21st century human being. Here we go. Poor modern 21st century human being. He is scared. Now, is there anybody here who has never been scared? Put your hand up. Good, no psychopaths in. Think of a time recently when you have felt scared and shout out the sort of emotions you get. Not emotions, start again. The feelings you get in your body when you're scared. What happens? Shaky. How do I draw shaky? Thanks for that one. Okay, I'm going to draw jelly because jellies are sort of wobbly. So you get jelly arms, jelly legs. Yeah, what else? Sweaty, yeah, there's another one. Breathless, yeah, okay, or tight chest, yeah. That's funny, I get that one, must be genetic. What else? Dry mouth, yeah, anything else? Stomach, butterflies. Yeah, butterflies in your stomach. Yeah, this pen's running out, never mind. There we go, anything else? Can feel faint, I'm going to draw that. Thank you. But your head goes a bit funny. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've got jelly muscles. Yeah, okay, any others? Anyone get palpitations? Yeah, okay, right. So there is our picture of modern 21st century human being who is scared. What does it remind you of? Dinosaurs, thank you, Mother. Does it remind you of the caveman a little bit? Yeah, and this is because although we think we're terribly sophisticated in the 21st century with our iPads and our iPhones and all of that, when it comes down to it, our brain has not evolved in 10,000 years. We are still stuck with the system for dealing with threat that our caveman ancestors had. Now, all they needed to do was to run really fast to get away from things that were scary for them. They didn't need anything more sophisticated. Unfortunately, if we've got a job interview, or if we have to give a presentation, or we have to go to the dentist, is running away and climbing up the nearest tree the best solution? Clearly it's not, but it's what we are stuck with. Right, now, all of this stuff that is going on in your body when you are scared, is it dangerous for you? Put your hands up if you think it is dangerous. It's going to kill you in the end. Yes. Okay. Okay, so, and it feels horrible, doesn't it? It feels, somebody said it makes you feel faint, it can make you feel, it feels vile. And it can even make you feel as if you're going a bit mad, you're kind of losing it a bit. Okay, actually all the evidence is that it's not doing any harm at all. I mean, yes, if you have it 10 times a day for 50 years, it's possibly not great for you, but for most people, it's not, this is normal. We've already established that everyone in the room has had this. It's normal and it's not doing you any harm. In fact, there's some evidence that it increases your immune function, and if you have a real fright, it's actually quite difficult to catch a cold for the next 4 hours. Also, has anyone ever had a panic attack, which is like an extreme form of this? I know I have. Most people, about half of us will have had one at some point during lives. If there's anyone here who has lots of panic attacks, 500 calories, that's a Mars bar, silver linings. Okay, so, but the fact is, you can't faint when this is happening because your blood pressure's too high, temporarily raised, and you can't faint when your blood pressure's high. There is one exception. Some people, when they see blood, they go a bit woozy, but in most cases, that is not the case. It is not doing you any harm. It's actually quite good for you to have this happen now and then. So yes, that is the fight-flight response, and that is the first thing we talk about, because we want parents to understand that when their child is experiencing these symptoms, when they are experiencing these symptoms, it's okay. There's no need to stress about it. There's no need to suddenly have to dive in and rescue your child. It's okay for them to feel anxious. Right, next thing. Okay, another little story. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Okay, so once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a land far, far away, there was a little tribe of villagers. Now, these villagers lived at the bottom of a volcano. And as you may know, volcanoes are very lush and fertile places. Stuff grows really easily. So these villagers were really lucky. They had all this beautiful stuff growing on their mountain. They had peach trees and a little chocolate hobnob bush and a little champagne river, lovely. So they'd go up every morning, fill their baskets with food, come down, massive feast, sleep it all off all afternoon. Lovely life of Riley. Until one day, something terrible happened. It was a storm. But it was a storm the like of which you have never seen before. The lightning flashed and the thunder crashed and silhouetted the mountain against the dark night sky, and the rain lashed against the hillside, and the villagers were terrified. They huddled together and they said, "What is happening? What is happening to our mountain?" And one of the elders of the village said, "It is the dog in the mountain. He is displeased with us for stealing his food." So the villagers were terrified. And the next morning came, the storm had gone, but they were still terrified and they wouldn't go up the mountain to get their food. And the next day came and they wouldn't go and get any food. And the next week came, the next month came, the next year came, and still nobody would go up the mountain to get any food. But they survived. They scraped a living on the thin soils around the mountain. They managed to grow some Brussels sprouts and some goat's cheese, but they survived. But as you know, over time, the stories grow. So over time, it stopped being a dog in the mountain and it became a lion in the mountain. And then it stopped being a lion in the mountain and it became a dragon in the mountain. Before you know it, it's a fire-breathing, baby-eating dragon in the mountain. There ain't no way anyone is going up there to get any food. But as I said, they scraped a living until one year the rains failed, their crops failed, and they had nothing to eat at all, and they were starving. They called a village meeting much like this to decide what they should do. So come on guys, what should they do? Alison, they can't go up the mountain to get food. There's got a dragon in the mountain.
I'll send my husband.
Well, that's, pretty much what they decided. They picked the oldest man. He was going to die anyway, and they sent him up the mountain. So he walks up the mountain. His legs are shaking. His chest is tight. His heart is beating, but he walks and he walks until eventually he gets to the top of the mountain. But just as he gets to the top of the mountain, there's a ginormous... Oh, how old are you, Lord? There's no such thing as dragons. He filled his baskets with food, took it down the mountain. They all had an enormous feast and lived happily ever after. A lovely story, I think you'll agree. Now, when we tell that story to kids and to parents, what is the moral of our tale? What are we saying? Exactly, you've got to go up that mountain and you've got to test out your fears. Absolutely. And if you don't do it straight away, what happens? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so do it as soon as possible. Absolutely. And this is basically me telling a story about avoidance, because avoidance is at the core of every anxiety disorder, whether you're looking at post-traumatic stress disorder or OCD or generalized anxiety disorder or panic disorder or one of the other 10 different anxiety diagnoses you can get. Avoidance is the key. If you get someone with an anxiety disorder, I promise you, every single last one of them, if you look hard enough, you'll find there's some avoidance underpinning it. And if you want to treat it, you have got to get them to drop that avoidance. Okay, so this is a really key message that we have to get to parents, that if you want your kids to be confident, if you see them avoiding things, you've got to dive in there and quick, and you've got to help them to not avoid. And we talk later about how they actually do that, because it's easier said than done. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the 7 confident thoughts. Now, the 7 confident thoughts is I have distilled basically what I think. I mean, there must be about 1 million papers written on child anxiety and what causes people to be anxious and so on. And I reckon you can distill it down to about 7 things. And really no need to read all 1 million papers. And I have called these the 7 confident thoughts. And I reckon if you can get your kids thinking the 7 confident thoughts, then you have pretty much cracked it. And these are what they are. So the first one is, the world is a pretty safe place. And at this point, I got off the room going, yeah? Is there anyone here who's thinking, no, not sure about that? Yeah, 1 or 2. Okay, right, so a little quiz. Are you ready? Since 1995, has violent crime in the UK gone up by half? Gone up by 20%, stayed about the same, gone down 20%, or gone down 50%? Cast your votes. Who thinks A, gone up half? B, C, D, E. Well done those of you who said E. It has halved. I know we've had this little spate in London, but it's still way, way lower than it's ever been. And this is a story throughout the Western world. We are seeing violent crime rates drop through the floor. Okay, I'm actually going to skip over the next one because they're a bit miserable, so I'm not going to do them. But basically what we do is we give parents the statistics for all the horrific things that they think could go wrong in the world, to show that actually growing up as a child in Britain in the 21st century is the safest it has ever been. And the odds of something awful happening to your child are that big. They're that big. Bad stuff, generally speaking, does not happen to our kids, and so most parents really worrying about their child are worrying, when the odds are very, very slim. So the rest of the 7 confident thoughts are here. I can cope with most things. Bad things don't usually happen to me. Actually, I'm going to skip on because I've got time against me. Bad things don't usually pop up out of the blue. This is an important one. A lot of anxious parents I work with, and parents of anxious kids that I've worked with, they don't like to get their kids upset, because their kids might get really, really upset and be really difficult to calm down, and it's all really horrible for everybody. So they don't tell them when difficult stuff is going to happen, and I totally get it. I see where that's coming from. It's coming from a good place. But you end up with a situation where a kid who's scared of the dentist doesn't find out they're going to the dentist until they're getting off the bus outside the dentist. Can anyone see a problem with that? Yeah, that kid has got to be on red alert 24/7 because crap can fly out of thin air any time and slap you around the face. Okay, so we say to parents, please, I know it's hard, but try to tell your children, just give them a little bit of notice, and the younger they are, the less notice they need. A little bit of notice when something difficult is going to happen, because then they can prepare themselves. And critically, then, when they've not had a warning that something bad's going to happen, they can just relax, okay? I have some control over the things that happen to me. That's a really important one. People are pretty nice, really, and other people respect me. So we talk to parents about, if you can get your kids to think these 7 things, then you've cracked it. You've got a confident kid. Now, how do you do this? Do you sit your kids down of an evening and say, kids, repeat after me? That's one way of doing it, but actually we think that parenting actions speak louder than parenting words. So what we say to parents is, in everything you do as a parent, and everything you do to set up your child's world, just try to have these at the back of your mind, and try to make sure that you just, every day, you just feed these a little tiny bit. And every day you just try to not chip away at them too much, because they will get chipped away sometimes, but just try to minimise it. And we will teach you how to do that. So then we go into part 2, which is using parental attention to build the 7 confident thoughts. And what we do is we teach parents a particular sort of play. It's called the child's game, which is a really lovely sort of play, which I'm not going to demonstrate, but basically the parent gets on the floor with the child, asks the child what they want to play, and then plays with them in a really engaged sort of way, and use lots of praise and lots of little cuddles and stuff like that. No teaching in this particular sort of play. No questions, oh, what colour's this and all of that. No, just play and just be with the child. And we know that really helps the 7 confident thoughts. Praise and reward. We ask parents to use praise to get their kids doing the things that they want them doing. Because all kids, sorry, you 3 on the front row, but all kids do things sometimes which are slightly annoying, it is true. And sometimes they don't do what you want them to. But we get parents to use lots of praise and reward to manage that, rather than the slightly more shouty style that anxious parents have told us that they can sometimes fall into. But you've got to get this right, okay? It's really, would you believe, difficult, not difficult to get praise wrong. So, for instance, Tom, Professorial, you are looking very smart today. You've got a nice smart shirt on. It's all nicely pressed and ironed and lovely. It's a pity you can't always make the effort. So I just gave Tom a lovely bit of praise. Which bit is he going to remember? He's going to remember the second bit, isn't he? We call the sting in the tail. You always look lovely. The sting in the tail, and parents do it all the time. So we talk to parents about stuff like that, getting the praise right, so that it really works to really boost your child's confidence, to boost the 7 confident thoughts, which I wrote here, just in case we needed them again. And using it to get more confident behaviour out of your child as well. So if your child is a bit nervous about something, using loads of praise and using the odd little reward to encourage them to do the thing they're scared of, to go up that mountain and test out their fears. We talk a bit about planned ignoring. It's okay to ignore your children sometimes. This is why I do it, George. It's all in the science to ignore you sometimes. So when they're moaning, whinging, whining, that sort of thing, it's okay to ignore that stuff, and it's quite good for them. Harsh punishment. What they should say is to not do harsh punishment, obviously. And so we talk to parents about how to use more positive consequences. And the way we do this is we go through a list of, I've got a lovely list of consequences that I have collected over my career. Now, some of them are from clients, but actually most often family and friends. Stuff like, let me think of one of them now. If you throw your breakfast at your sister one more time, you will go to bed right now. And we unpick why that may not work, because first of all, most children's bedrooms are like Hamleys. Second of all, the bedroom is meant to be a nice, calm, relaxing, happy place to be. And finally, are you going to manage to make that kid stay in their bedroom all day, or is it going to completely torment you and the child and everyone? So the idea is that you make a threat that you can actually carry through. Okay, so I'm not going to say any more about that, but we talk to parents about getting a list of consequences that they know will work and aren't harsh and that they can see through. Okay, what do parents do when their child is scared? So this is a little bit of research that we did in our lab. So parents are given a box, okay, and it has, oh Miranda, close your eyes, where are you? Sorry, you're right. Okay. Are given a box with, it's got snake-related paraphernalia in it. So it's a cartoon drawing of a snake. Here we go, and it's a photo of a snake, and it's a toy snake, and then it's a dead snake. And what we say to them is, we've got loads of this stuff in our lab. We've got a cupboard of horrors. It's got all sorts of really horrific stuff in there. This is just one of the boxes. And if the child tells us they don't like snakes very much, this is the box that comes out. So what we say is, we say to the parent, right, here's all this snake stuff. We want you to get your child to play with this snake stuff. Get them to touch the picture, and then get them to touch look at the snake photo, then touch the snake photo, look at the toy snake, touch the toy snake, look at the real snake, touch the real snake. So there's a series of steps we want them to go through, working up to the scary thing. So all families do that, and we video it. Then half our families get a tutorial on how to manage fear in kids, and it's all the stuff I've just talked about. Half of them get a distraction task video where it's about learning to read, teaching kids to read. And then we get them to do the whole thing again with a different box, and this time it's got, say, spiders in it, spidery sort of stuff. And so the tutorial gets parents to increase approach parenting, so modelling confident behaviour, giving confident verbal information to the child, encouraging the child to approach the box, and praising the child when they approach the things. And it's trying to get parents to reduce avoidance parenting, so getting parents to stop modelling anxious behaviour, so none of this, it's disgusting. Try to stop parents giving anxious verbal information, careful, it might have germs, don't be saying that. Stopping parents encouraging avoidance, stopping parents praising avoidance. Okay. And then parents get the spider box again, and they do it all again, and we video them to see if our tutorial really helped or not. And this is what we found. The tutorial really increased approach parenting, which is exactly what we wanted, really encouraging your child to approach the scary objects. However, for the people in the other video who just saw a video about how to teach a kid to read, we actually saw approach parenting fall in the second box with the spider. The tutorial also significantly decreased avoidance parenting. Okay, so the stuff we wanted parents to drop, when they did drop it when they'd had our tutorial. Whereas the other parents who had the reading video, they actually did more of it second time round. And this was not affected by whether the parents were anxious or not. We had some clinically anxious parents, and we had some non-anxious parents. We had some anxious children, we had some non-anxious children. It didn't matter, it worked for everybody. And this is the critical one. Did the kids get closer to the end step? Did they get closer to touching that snake? Did they get closer to touching that spider if their parents had had our tutorial? And yes, they did. They did more steps if their parents had had the tutorial than if their parents had not, if their parents had had the boring reading tutorial. Okay, right. Part 3 of our one-day workshop for anxious parents. We talk about parenting hotspots. I've told you what these are already. And the things that seem to be particular hotspots for anxious parents seem to be overprotection, understandably. If you're constantly seeing lots of threat in your child's world, you're going to want to go like that and protect your child from all of those threats. It's totally understandable. Okay, but we also think parents may sometimes be modelling some things to their children that make their children feel a little bit scared. So I'm going to give you a little example now. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you're about 5 years old and I am your mum. Okay? And we're all in our sitting room at home. Okay. Oh, Derek, I can't believe I've got to go to the dentist. Oh, it's a nightmare. I hate going there. Oh, honestly, last time I was there, the nurse, she's a psychopath. She was horrible. She was like, are you all right? Of course I'm not all right. I'm in a bloody dentist. And the dentist, he was there with this drill like that. And on the needle, it's that long, so it was coming out the top of my face. Oh, it's absolute. What am I going to do? I don't think I can go. I can't go, Derek. I'm not going. Loads up the dentist, not coming by. Derek, where's the gin? Okay, so you are 5, you've never been to the dentist. Which, Georgie, is the dentist fine? Oh God, I've given my child a phobia. The dentist's fine, we go to the dentist. You have never been to the dentist, you've never even heard of the dentist. What are you now thinking about the dentist? Scary, awful, horrific things are going to happen. Will you be looked after? Will you be safe? No, exactly. What have you learned about what you should do in that situation when you are scared? Avoid, get out, and... Yeah. Okay, so possibly not the most positive messages you could give to your children. So we want parents to, nobody's actually doing that in real life, but just getting parents to think a little bit about the messages that might be coming out and just try to, just pen those in a bit. But does this work? Does it work getting parents to just cover up their fear? Well, we think it does. We got parents to put their hands into 3 mystery boxes. They come into the lab. Some of these parents were had clinical anxiety disorders, some did not. They come into our lab and we have 3 boxes with a hole in them, and each of these boxes is plugged into the mains. Okay, and it's all gone through an ethics committee. The first box, it's clearly empty. We unplug it from the wall. We say to the parent, put your hand in. They put their hand in, it's fine. We video them doing it. The next box, this is plugged into the wall. And we tell the parents that there's a 50-50 chance they will get a mild but uncomfortable shock. Nobody ever gets a shock, but we tell them that they do. And then we say, now put your hand in the box. And it's true, people will do anything in a lab, but they just put their hand in the box. But they are looking quite nervous about it, and we video it. The final box, we say, right, you were lucky, you didn't get a shock, 50-50. See what happens next time. Here's another box, plug it in. Zzz. We want you to put your hand in this box, but this time, we want you to not look scared, okay? Poker face. So they put their hand in the box, they don't get a shock, they pull it out. We quickly cut up all these videos, so we just got 3 little videos of each box. We turn the sound off, so there's no sound. All the videos show is the parent putting their hand in the box. We then show those videos to their children, and then we say to the child, here are the boxes, you've just seen your mum put her hand in. Now you put your hand in those boxes. We don't tell the children anything about the boxes, we don't tell them anything about shocks or what's in the box. We just show them the box and the video of their mum putting their hand in it. And they do it mostly, they do put their hand in the box, a little bit of suspicion. And we measure their heart rate, and this is what we find. In our control box, where the parent wasn't scared, that's the kid's heart rate. Where the parent was scared and was showing it, the kid's heart rate goes up. When the parent was scared but was trying to cover it, it comes down a bit. Not much, but it comes down a bit. So this suggests to us that kids can read their parents' emotion very well from their face. And when parents cover it up, it helps a bit. Not massively, but a bit. Okay. Right, part 4, I'm really getting close to the end, but I will talk quickly. Part 4 of our workshop, we teach parents how to do fear hierarchy. So this is, if your child is starting to show a fear of something, how do you help them to go up that mountain and test it out? Okay, how do you help your child with a phobia? Now, does anyone remember having swimming lessons at school? Anyone have swimming lessons? Yeah. Did anyone ever get taught how to dive into the pool? Nobody. Was it really just me? Okay, Granny, you got taught how to... Did they... Oh gosh, I know the sort of school you went to. Did they grab you by the ankles and drop you in the deep end? No. How did they do it?
They did it gradually.
Gradually. So what was the first step?
Just starting at the shallow end and jumping in.
Oh, okay, yeah. Going up the deep... Then going up the deep end. Yeah, so did the first... When you're up the deep end the first time, did you just sit on the edge, calves in the water, and just sort of roll in? Does anyone just roll in? And it's okay. Everyone's terrified of diving in, you know, at the start of double PE. But they just get you diving in like that. Right. Once you've mastered that, what's next? You kind of like this on the edge of the pool, right? Yeah. And you can't. No. Apparently, I'm doing it wrong, according to my mother. But this is how I was taught how to do it. So then you just crouch. Anyone else? Yeah, do it this way. So you just crouch on the edge and you roll in, yeah. And when you've cracked that, what next? Bit higher, bit higher, bit higher, bit higher. By the end of double PE, you're going in backwards. Okay? And that is how You get a child over a fear. We no longer take kids by the ankles and drop them in the deep end. You do it step by step. You break the fear into tiny little baby steps and you work up to it. And so we teach parents how to do this. This is something that, clinical psychologists have had we think we've had a bit of a monopoly. I know, yes, it takes 9 years at university to learn how to do a fear hierarchy. We taught parents how to do it. We gave parents a 10-minute video tutorial on how to do a fear hierarchy. Then we got them to do a fear hierarchy for us. We said, right, imagine you've got a kid who's scared of rabbits, draws a fear hierarchy. We gave the same task to second-year clinical psychology trainees who should be very skilled at this, to see where our parents were struggling and if our tutorial needed to fill in any gaps. Who do you think did best, the parents or the second-year clinical psychology trainees? It was identical. 10 minutes, sorry Shelley, this is pretty shocking, isn't it? 10 minutes training and the parents were as good as the second-year trainees. I'll tell you which course later. Okay, now, so this is all very right at the end now. Putting it all together, so we've got parents, we had 100 parents take part in this trial. 50 of those parents were invited to come along to our one-day workshop that I've just described to you. 50 of them got nothing. Essentially, they got a few leaflets, but nothing more than that. And what we did is, we didn't see the kids at all, just saw the parents for this one day, sent them away, and we followed them up for a year to see what happened to their children. And this is what happened. So this is a Spence Anxiety Scale, which is a questionnaire of child anxiety, and it's a very, very good questionnaire. These are kids who were in the control group, whose parents got nothing. At the start, they had a little bit of anxiety, but 12 months later that had gone up and up and up, and it's really quite high by the end. For the people who had our intervention, at the start they had a little bit of anxiety, but it fell. Okay, and 12 months later they were less anxious than they had been when they started with ours. And this is what we get if we look at diagnosis. Now, we didn't measure diagnosis at the beginning of the trial because we didn't have the resources to do it. It's very expensive to do. But we know that the kids on the questionnaires were all the same. The kids who got our treatment, the kids who didn't get our treatment were the same. So if we look at the diagnoses at the end of our intervention, here we've got the kids who had the intervention. Half of them have an anxiety disorder. Even after our treatment, half of them have an anxiety disorder. But critically, half of them don't. But in our control group, who got nothing at all, a lot of them have an anxiety disorder and fewer of them are anxiety disorder free. And what we find is that people, where the parents came on our course, their children were 16% less likely to have an anxiety disorder than the kids in the control group. Which doesn't sound like a massive amount, but we worked out how much this cost, and we reckon it costs somewhere between £50 and £90 per child, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. So we reckon for under £100 a head, we can reduce these kids' risk of anxiety disorder by about 16%, and we think that's pretty good value. We need to do some more research along these lines. It's very preliminary, but it also shows us that it was feasible and it's doable. That is it, other than to say thank you to all these people who have had a really important hand in this research. It is clearly not just me who has done all of this. So thank you to all of these wonderful people, and thank you to you. Thank you very much.